Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Special Economic Zones. I am your host, Ainsley Brown. I am the Senior Director with responsibility for regulations, policy monitoring, and enforcement at Jamaica's Special Economic Zone Authority. In today's episode, I would like to cover a topic that frequently comes up. Why special economic zones? Why did Jamaica go special economic zones? We already had free zones. Why did we go to special economic zones? Aren't they the same thing? I covered in one episode already that it's basically the same thing. So why did we change over? It doesn't make sense. Well, there are three principal reasons, and two are very well known. In fact, one is more known than all three. The first one is that we were required under the WTO to get rid of export subsidies or obligations under the World Trade Organization, and we had up until 2015 to get that done, and along with several other developing states which had been granted reprieve by the WTO to get that done. So we had to get that done. The second reason, and so that's the first one, and that's the typical reason that people hear about, but there's another reason. The second reason, and it's connected to the first reason, is that we were under a pretty austere IMF program at the time, probably the most austere in history, and the IMF, seeing that we were going to make that change, basically said, okay, since you're making that change, we are going to make it a condition of our loan. So the IMF, as part of the international economic governance structure of the world, in essence, because of the conditionalities within our loan program, help to shape the direction and the choice of SEZs versus free zones. So the WTO said we had to do it because we're a member of the WTO. We wish to remain in good standing. IMF said, you're under an IMF program. You're going to make this change, so it's now part of my program as well. And the third reason, and this is the reason that doesn't get spoken about enough or basically at all, and is the one that I am most excited about, is that we had to do it for ourselves. Our free zones of the past, with outdated legislation, it was brought around in a time in the late 70s, early 80s, when the primary objective of the zone was mass employment. Now, employment is always going to be a goal of a zone regime, but mass employment largely centered around cheap labor. Now, that philosophy is a thing of the past. We have to forge industries. We can't just have segments of as we did in the past. We had a garment industry, and I'm hesitant to say garment industry because we had elements, but we didn't build out a full garment industry. It didn't mushroom like it did in Bangladesh, where they started off in a sense making garments, and then they multiplied from there out into buttons, zippers, all the other thread, actual fabric, and such and so forth. So a full ecosystem mushroomed out of the garment sector. We didn't have that. Part of the reason why we didn't have that, it's not the only reason, but it's part of the reason, is that our economic zone or free zone regime at the time was outdated, based on policy directions that were very appropriate at the time but had become outdated. So we needed to modernize in order to facilitate and attract more diverse industries to the country. we changed, as I mentioned in a previous episode, away from a positive list where we said these are the industries that we want, and these are the industries that only these are allowed in the zone unless the list is changed, to a negative list where we said this is what we don't want in the zones or to benefit from the fiscal incentives, and then everything else is allowed. So there's greater flexibility given to the regime. And also, we also added certain performance-based incentives in there, because an occupant, for example, who applies to a developer to get status, their corporate income tax rate is 12.5%, but they have two incentive additional credits that they can use, which is the Promotional Tax Credit, which is more, is not what you think. It's not promotional in terms of marketing and so forth. It's more about research and development and things like that. And also they can use the Employment Tax Credit. So you employ people and then you get, in a sense, a further credit to be able to bring down your tax rate from 12.5 to up to 7.75. That's possible, but those are incentives that are performance based. So you have to employ, you have to be doing research and development, but also importantly, you have to be tax compliant in order to benefit from those additional incentives. So in summary, the three reasons for us, Jamaica that is, and I'm sure that other countries around the world would be influenced by their own history and economic development as to why SEZ versus a free zone. One is that we had to do it to comply with the WTO. Two, we had to do it because we had to comply with the IMF. And three, we had to do it for ourselves. So that's pretty much it. So if you liked this episode, please subscribe or like or share or leave a comment. Feedback is most welcome. Thank you.